Welcome to the panel where smart founders discuss the realities of building better products and a better life. I'm one of your hosts, Justin Jackson. I'm the co-founder of Transistor.fm.
And I'm Brian Castle. I am working on instrumental products. So today, what do we got, Justin?
This
Who do we
week
have here?
on the panel, we've got...
I'm Caleb Porzio. I've been a Laravel dev for a long time, and I build Livewire and Alpine.js and Flux, like JavaScript-y dev products.
And we've also got...
Yeah, I'm Taylor Otwell, the creator of Laravel. I wrote Laravel back in 2011 and still am head of the company now.
This is perfect. This is actually a perfect segue into what I want to talk about. My kids are older than your guys' kids. I've got 2 in high school, 2 in college, and they're trying to think about their career, what they should do. My question is web development still a good career these days? Should my kids be considering web development as a career? Do you advise people to pursue it? And if so, what path should they take? Caleb, you had an episode of Notes on Work on this.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your thoughts about this right now?
This is founded in nothing, but I'm like, in 3 years' time, I've totally switched, and I'm like, no, don't get into web development.
Okay.
Because I've like sold people on it in the past, and it's worked out great. But the recent batch of people that I've sold on web development, like literally haven't been able to get jobs. And then, so my brother, he switched from HVAC and he got a job, but then he moved and he lost the job. They wouldn't let him move from Denver and whatever. And he couldn't find another job. It's like nobody's hiring anybody below like mid. And I don't know. It's just different. I'd be like, I'd stay away personally.
Yeah.
To a newcomer. I love,
To a newcomer. So a kid who's 19, you're like, don't,
Yeah,
go.
it's too unknown, and it's not like it was. Like, money's not all over the floor. You're not just going to easily get a job, and it could all change in a few years. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it personally.
Do you think it's
guys,
because the bar is higher now? Like, web development is just harder. Is that part of it? Like, is it people that didn't grow up programming like some of us may have? Like, I started writing my first websites when I was like 10 or 11.
Yeah, me too.
But now, like building websites it's complicated. Is that why? Like, do companies just have a higher bar for who they let in the door, and you'd have to have more advanced skills to even get a job?
I just feel like, remember that the entire like 10 years of, I feel like it was ridiculous that everybody was getting paid, but they're getting paid, and people like who knew nothing. I don't know. I feel like I don't think it's too hard. I think you look at like HVAC or something, look at any other trade, and the people who make $60,000 are like excellent at the thing they're doing and did an apprenticeship for 4 years, where people just go into React boot camp for like 2 months were making 80 grand. So it was just like wrong,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just feel like there was something weird going on.
ZERP era phenomenon.
I do think that there's going to be a big trend, if it's not starting already. Like the coding boot camps with AI. I know we're going to get into AI and stuff, but like, I think more people are going to. It's going to become more accessible and more expected that the workforce has technical skills. And picking up those technical skills is going to get easier and easier and easier. And I guess the question that I have for Justin is like, what do we mean by a career in web development? That's pretty broad. Like getting a job at a big tech company, or employed as a software engineer somewhere, or because I think that more professionals in all parts of the workforce are going to need technical building skills. Like, there's just going to be more building involved in all parts of the economy, whereas right now it's really just like either you work in tech or you don't. I think as my kids are 8 and 10, when they get into the workforce, I feel like almost every professional industry is going to be considered like a technical job in some form.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to square like what's happening in the broader economy, because I do care about it. And there's all these layoffs. I think Stripe just announced a bunch more layoffs. And kind of the joke that I hear is that Laravel is the only one that's hiring.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it. Taylor, do you think that's true? Like, all the companies is Laravel one of the only ones that's hiring, or is that just a misnomer?
Well, we are hiring. That part is true.
It's like your kids lose jobs.
I would say that Laravel, as I ran it as a bootstrap company, was always very anemic on our staffing. Like, we were understaffed, I think, compared to the amount of customers we had and the amount of revenue we had. It just was kind of silly. And a lot of that was just for selfish reasons, right? Like, the more people I hire, the less I make, So, like, you're not incentivized to hire to a healthy amount and really, like, invest in the business. But yeah, we are hiring. Although I would say that even in our hiring, which feels like a lot for us, we're still trying to be pretty judicious in how many people we hire. We're hiring a lot of people that we sort of know, to be honest, like out of the full stack Laravel world. Because we want to maintain our culture of like moving fast, shipping fast. And that's just hard to do. Like the more people you bring on, the harder that gets. And so we're still trying to be cautious about it. But, I think probably a lot of companies did overhire a lot and are correcting.
Yeah. And it's hard to know if this is a short-term correction. Because we have seen these waves before. Like there was the big Ruby on Rails wave, and there was like tons of Rails boot camps. And then, President Obama's telling everybody to learn to code. And so everybody goes and then there's just only so many jobs for my theory is that there's just not that many good jobs, that many good employers in any economy. And there's actually not that much great talent in any economy. And so is there always going to be a place for people who have a lot of passion and a lot of talent? I think yes.
Yeah.
And will there always be good companies with solid fundamentals that are hiring? Yes. What's less clear to me is like what happens at big companies, but it does seem like they go through waves. Like they're just like, and you'd think they'd be smarter, but during COVID, they all hired up like crazy. And then it's like, oh, we don't need all these people.
I've always been completely out of touch with what a big company, especially a big tech company, actually looks like. Because my entire career, when I was employed, 15, 20 years ago, it was a team of like 20 or less. And like to think about like Stripe or one of these places with like thousands of engineers, like literally, I know how big of a product Stripe is, but still, like, what are you putting all those people on? How do you have that many people, enough projects to fill their plates? Like, it just seems insane to have so many people. It does seem like we went through a decade or more of a pretty big bubble, and in the last couple of years, it's like correcting back to some semblance of like a normal company. In terms of size.
I suspect a lot of what happens at those larger companies, because I've seen it a little bit as I've talked to people, is, obviously the founder is not doing the hiring. It's like you bring in some sort of middle management layer, and the middle management sales guy comes in and says, oh, I need a team of 10 more sales guys. And, next thing you know, you do that a few times and you've got like 100 new people or 1,000 new people, and then you're just kind of way out of control.
Yeah, I think, are you guys still bullish on the web and web development in general? Like, there's a weird, even, Caleb, this is something else you were questioning, which is, and I want to get Taylor's take on this. Why is Laravel growing? And I think what you said was...
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, why doesn't it make sense? Why do you think it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, because like the pipeline, this pipeline problem of like when I got into web development, it was like PHP, everybody, it's what React is now. And at the time it was like CodeIgnite or whatever, but pretty quickly, basically it's like, what do you see when you Google search, you're just getting into it, you don't even know what you don't know, and you start looking stuff and you go like, what should I use? And what does everybody say on Google and Stack Overflow? And there was a moment in time, I totally remember like evaluating it. Like I was buying a camera or something where I just like looking at the brands, and it was like coding, oh, Laravel, you got to use Laravel. Like Laravel's awesome. You should use Laravel. And then the web artisan page, whatever. So use Laravel. And now that's so far from being the way that it works that it's like, where are people coming from? So there must be this like massive hopper of WordPress and Symfony or whatever of people or it's just like mysterious to me in this way that's like we're not in the pipeline. So how is it that we're still growing? Like Livewire's growing, Laravel's growing it's like crazy. But yeah, it's a mystery to me. I don't know. Taylor probably know a lot better than I would.
What do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, I think I've had similar thoughts. So I know when we first started building cloud, and I was thinking about, what we currently have with Forge, where we have 20,000 customers or something like that. And I was like, there's no one else left in the market to sell cloud to. They're already using Forge. But what I've been surprised by is there's actually a ton of PHP and Laravel out there in the world that is just not on social media. They're not talking about it at all. They weren't even using Forge because they're using some homegrown company Kubernetes setup or something. And I think there's just so much PHP in the world that people are modernizing onto Laravel. We see that quite a bit from like legacy PHP projects, and they want to get up to date. And Laravel's kind of the most sensible option for them. But honestly, I just think that so much of web development is outside of social media. Like the vast majority, well over 90% of it, obviously, is like outside of anything you could possibly perceive on social media. Even at larger companies, like some of our larger companies interested in cloud, I've never heard of them using Laravel before they like reached out to us about cloud. It was never on Twitter. It's never anything like that.
Yeah. That's a funny thing. I definitely agree. And like the state of surveys and everything, those are all fed by like Twitter and social media.
Yeah.
So you see like technologies, like one of my favorites, HTMX, longtime favorite, shout out to HTMX, gets all this popularity, but it's not really indicative of like who's using what. It's just like, influencers were like hyping it for a period, and now all the social media circles got it, and then they all answer those surveys. So it's like, what is even this data?
This entire topic is funny because I actually had a call with Microsoft's Azure team, and they asked this exact same question. So it's confusing even to them to some extent.
Yeah.
To some extent, they were like, what do you think about like JavaScript and PHP? And like their take was, we see JavaScript is super popular with like these boot camps in React, but like no one seems to be building anything substantial with it on our side, at least.
No one ever has.
And so
it's like, it's crazy.
But even they found it confusing, so I think it's, I don't know.
So weird. Right. It's like, I mean, we still ask as Laravelites, but it's like that question of like, so these are the popular technologies, but how do you actually build something with
that? That's
like,
exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking about here. Is like I'm always thinking about it from the perspective of a builder and our little corner of the internet of like bootstrapped entrepreneurs, like Saas, like startup folks, right? Mm-hmm. Which I know is a tiny drop in the bucket of the worldwide like tech scene or coverage for different technologies, right? But from that perspective, like that's what I've been attracted to in particular stacks. Like I've been attracted to Laravel and Ruby on Rails. And these are ecosystems that make it, it's almost surprising to me that these are not more popular than the Reacts and the JavaScript based stuff. It's like everything is here that you need to build a legit, application or product for the world. And it seems like the ecosystems are so well connected here that it's easy and fast to ship and market products. It's just surprising to me that like when I look at these cutting edge tools now, especially I'm looking at like tools that people are using to build with AI. I'm trying to understand like where are the non-technical people going to learn how to become a builder. That's something I'm very interested in right now. And I'm looking at all these tools like I don't know, like Bolt and like Lovable, these like AI builder editor tools. Mm-hmm. None of them support like PHP or Laravel or Ruby on Rails as their like set of options that you can build with in their interface. It's like, how is that possible?
Yeah. I've actually got a quick question that I think applies to all three of you. Because Brian, you're building these Rails components, right?
Yep.
And Caleb, you have Livewire and Flux and Alpine, and then obviously Taylor, you've got Laravel and that whole ecosystem. What percentage of your customers are big companies, and what percentage are just individual small companies? Like, is what's driving those businesses? Like I imagine with Tailwind, like Tailwind is used by giant companies, and so I wonder if like a lot of that momentum is actually driven by these big companies adopting and using the technology, or is it a mix? Is it just small teams? It's like who's like Caleb, who's your customer? Who's the ideal customer for Flux?
So I think it's two things. I think it's small, medium sized, but small businesses.
Okay.
And I think that's at least my experience with Laravel in general. It's like, to me, everybody who uses Laravel and Rails was like a chiropractor, and then they were like getting into coding a little bit, and they made their own thing for their own chiropractic thing, and then they sold it to other ones, and now they have a business. That's everyone.
Yeah,
everyone was a chiropractor.
That's much more true in Laravel than Rails, although I think it's also true in Rails. But that if you go to a LaraCon, that's definitely
like insurance agents.
It's all chiropractors.
Yeah.
But I also, so I think it's chiropractors that size, but it's also like I think individual developers make these decisions, right? Like even at big companies. I feel like, and that's why this social media stuff, like, it does matter. It matters what shows up when you Google, because whatever people think is the thing or the hot thing, you're gonna tell your. But yeah,
I'm only at the very beginning of like the customer research into the types of customers who are entering the list for instrumental components for Rails. So I'm sure, Caleb, you have like a lot more like of a data set to understand who these people are.
Probably don't look at it though, like as well as you might think. So like you probably know more than I do.
Well, I guess the split that I'm seeing, it's, I don't know, maybe call it 50-50, is like half of them are just like solo builders, entrepreneur. There's probably a lot of side hustles in there. Just like, hey, I got my job. I want to like build something on the side. I want to use a cool new tool that I heard about on Twitter or something. But the other half, I think, are employed developers at some small to medium sized business, and nobody else on their team might know or care about what tech stack they are choosing to build stuff in. But they are the developer who gets to sort of decide like which tooling they bring into the projects for some company. And I think that's and a lot of them are like in the components world. I'm sure this is true for users of Flux. There's a lot of back-end developers, and with Tailwind taking over everything, which is amazing. I love it. People without design chops and UI chops and people who get frustrated on the front end, they are looking for shortcuts to build stuff without, having to wire it up.
Taylor, what about on your side? Do you have a sense of the kind of the types of customers you have for Forge and what you're aiming for with cloud?
Yeah, we've run some stats on that before, and it's definitely a mix. Obviously, there's a big long tail of like just kind of hobbyists, solopreneurs or sort of freelancers. Then you kind of have quite a few agencies, like Titan or Vehicle are two popular agencies in the Laravel world, and they're the ones that actually end up sometimes infiltrating Laravel into these larger organizations through their agency work. And then we actually do have like mid-market or even like approaching enterprise type customers. And we've seen this like on our early access to Laravel Cloud, where we've got like a pizza chain on there. Even like companies like Elastic or Paddle, or we've got a company right now that's working with the NHS building a big system. And so that's just a lot of like that under the radar stuff that just doesn't pop up really on social media. So we know it's out there. Now, how much it's out there, I think we don't have a full grasp on until we really get our like hosted cloud platform out the door and kind of just start making calls and people start coming to us, and then we'll have a better idea of it. But it's definitely out there. And I think, again, there's so much legacy PHP out there that, we'll see how that goes as well. I think that's kind of a pipeline for additional Laravel apps. I do think that like, this circles way back to your first question about would you get into web development?
Yeah.
I think that I would probably say no, unless you're super into it. And I think that post that Rails wave of work, I feel like these days you just don't see as many like bootstrap startups in general as compared to that Rails wave, and I see that in Laravel as well. And I guess part of it is just like the consolidation of the internet to some extent, where like, I remember back when I first created Laravel, people were like building their own social networks and like, building forums and stuff like that. And it's just like a category of sites that people don't build anymore. Which
Nuno.
I think is
Nuno's the only one left who's like, I'm just going to build a social network.
Sorry,
Yeah.
who's that?
Nuno Maduro, he works for Laravel, but he just made a social network. Anyway,
we'll see. We'll see, you know, how many of these bigger customers are out there. I would say historically our customer base has been, you know, smaller to mid-market and less so like enterprise.
There's just my perspective is so limited, and to me, I still see tons of opportunity for new SaaS companies, new bootstrapped SaaS companies. And I understand, like, there was a wave where everybody tried to build a Rails-based SaaS and realized it was difficult. And a lot of those people maybe became jaded. And, you know, I'm not saying any of it's easy, but there's still like, my kids are in college, like I said, they're going to graduate and they're going to get to a job and their boss is going to say, hey, why don't you go find us a calendar booking utility, you know? And they're going to be like, okay. They've never heard of any of them. They're just going to research, and it's very likely they'll find SavvyCal, which is the new one, and they'll use that one. And even some of these old categories that have incumbents, I'm surprised people aren't trying to build competitors in those niches, because some of them are old and crusty, and it's like, man, like, just give us a fresh take on this. So I don't know. I mean, obviously there's limits, but
this is kind of spicy, but I think like the Gen Z generation of developers actually doesn't typically have the skills to do it. And it's just because of how I think it's because of, you know, there's been such a front end focus the last 5 to 10 years in web development, where a lot of people are coming in and they're great on like the front end, you know, like they're way better than me at that kind of stuff, but they don't understand like the databases or the queues or caches or all the stuff on the back end that you would maybe need to piece together to build a SaaS like that. And, you know, I had been having these thoughts for a while, and I went to Rails World in Toronto, actually. Yeah. And I met a guy that has a really big Rails-based startup, actually. And he's younger than me. He's like in his 20s. And I was like, dude, this is something I've been thinking about, and I'm just curious, like, if you have any insight here, but do you feel like people your age know like how to build complete apps? And he was like, oh no, they're totally lost. Like, and he was like, they're all stuck in this front end world and they need something like Rails or Laravel, and they just haven't gotten there. And he said it's created like a gap, you know, in like what people can actually ship on their own.
And that really does speak to like the lack of as popular as the Reacts are, like the lack of an ecosystem like Laravel and Rails, where you can put all the batteries together and all the tools together. What I'm curious, you know, to pick up on that question, Justin, what I'm really interested in from Caleb and Taylor here is maybe going back to the beginning of your career, and maybe as it relates today. Like, it seems to me that you like other folks, like I would put like Adam Wathan in this category, like people who really built a great piece of technology, like created something new in the open source world. It seems like you've come out of like this inspiration to build something great, to create something unique and your vision for solving a certain problem. And that snowballed into a fantastic business. And then there's a lot of people in our bootstrapped SaaS world or startup world who come at it from a business first standpoint. Like Justin, you're talking about, like, why don't more people just go out and look for these opportunities to build the next calendar app, or look for these opportunities? It seems like folks like Caleb, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but like it seems like it was like the creative inspiration first, and then that snowballed into more of a business. I mean, I heard Adam talking about it the other day. It's like he's like a builder at heart, and the business side is uninteresting to him, but he has a fantastic business now as a result of it. I'm curious how you guys think about this, and maybe like where you've landed today from where you've come from. I
mean, Taylor's got the big story. I got the small one, but it's that. I mean, I am a builder, so I was just hacking on stuff and reading stuff and publishing stuff, and then my thing got popular, and then another one got popular, but Yeah, and then the money was always just like, I just got lucky because Nathan Barry taught Adam how to charge for courses, and Adam taught me how to charge for courses, and so it's like, oh, now I can make money. And then I found Justin Jackson because of Adam, and whatever, and then that whole kind of world, whatever. But Justin, like Justin's insights, like something that I sort of carry around with me when I'm talking to other people because of you. Your influence is like just thinking about an opportunity in terms of like the size of the market, like largely determining your opportunity for success, rather than like, is it a great idea? Or you might think like, oh, like nobody's building this, but that's actually like not a good. It's like the market's going to determine everything. That was all completely new to me. That's not how I thought, and that's not how people like me, I think is you're just building stuff, and then the rest kind of comes later. So yeah, that is my experience, Brian.
Yeah,
Taylor?
and Taylor, wait a second. So in some ways, Caleb, your experience is similar to Taylor's because you were just a young kid that got excited about something and you started sharing it. And I mean, there's always a series of lucky breaks that happens there, but I don't see them that dissimilar. Yeah, and Taylor,
Yeah, they're probably pretty similar. Just it's mini babies, but whatever. Go on, hit us, Taylor.
No, I mean, when I was first building Laravel, I had no idea if anyone else would use it at all. And honestly, that wasn't really like the focus. I was just building something for myself to build startup ideas faster. People liked it over time and then, kind of put businesses around it as it made sense. But even those businesses were still about kind of like scratching my own itch and just solving problems I had. I didn't know if anyone would really use them or how popular they would be. That being said, I do think like, and I've heard Justin say this quite a bit, like just picking like a meat and potatoes web app, like a hiring app or an invoicing app or whatever it may be, and just like making a sexy version of that that's new is like a pretty tried and true way to like have a successful business, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is, but something I'm thinking a lot about this year is I feel like I've overcorrected in the other way in the last several years of like just looking for the opportunities and maybe losing touch of like, well, what is it that I'm actually fired up about to create? Like scratching your own itch. There is such a premium to that. I think when you're choosing the right business or career path to go after. I think this gets under talked about in like startup business circles, right?
Yeah. Adam and I used to talk about this a lot.
Yeah,
being on the hunt for a business, we would say, is like the darkest place you could possibly be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just being opinionated about the thing that you created Laravel as a way to speed up your own process because it works for you, and then other people like it. That could be sort of a risky path because you don't know if there's going to be a market there. But I think being your own true customer number one for your thing, scratching your own itch, is sort of a superpower that you should really like leverage if you have it. And then that's the thing that kind of drives like, okay, I have this itch I want to scratch. How do I build it? And then I go learn how to build using whatever path is in front of me.
Yeah. These are all like necessary but not sufficient on their own. You need to have a great market. And, maybe Taylor just accidentally fell into the PHP market. Like, who knew how big that oil well was when he started picking at it? And it just turns out that PHP had this incredible footprint in the world. And there was just all this kind of latent demand of people that were hungry for somebody to come and like spice things up. And then he did. And then I think you need both. It's like, I think we can teach people to recognize when there's alignment between like, oh man, I'm really fired up about this. And there's also a good market here at the same time. And if both of those things are there, that's kind of a lot of what you need to make it work.
I think there's like a yes and here though, because like, yes, there's a massive market of PHP users in the world, but you could also make the argument that like PHP grew as a result of Laravel growing and the ecosystem around that. Same with Ruby. Do you think like there'd be so many Ruby developers today if Rails was never a thing?
Yeah.
That made it easier for people to actually build products and applications. And like you could also look at things like WordPress, that I was in the WordPress ecosystem 10, 15 years ago, where it was like, well, that's the ecosystem that has that puts all the tools together to make it easy to build stuff.
Yeah, I think
like
this is
WAMP. You remember WAMP? Like
Oh, yeah.
for Windows and MySQL, whatever. Yeah. Apache, MySQL, Peach. Like I tried to learn Rails when I was getting started in web, and I had like failed. But like WAMP is so easy, and cPanel or whatever, that PHP MyAdmin, like those tools were tools that my pea brain could like use and understand. And I feel like that's a huge. So maybe at the time, like Laravel wasn't even out. Why was PHP's obviously WordPress and platforms like, but just the platform of just like, this thing is so easy to use and get something running. You don't have to know a single command line command, you know?
Yeah. And
which I think mattered a lot at the time and is a big reason why.
And it's easier now. Here's the thing, I think, for all three of you that I think about a lot. I think a lot about the pipeline problem, because it does seem like young kids today aren't as excited about the web as I was in 93, 94, 95, 96, all through that time. And there's all sorts of reasons for it. But even thinking about how we all got into things, like, you know, Nathan Barry had a big effect, I think, on all of us when he started doing shit and then publishing it. And it was inspirational to think like, oh man, I could build something. Joel Spolsky was like this for a lot of people. There's always like a character that comes out and says, man, you guys got to be doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And even like as a kid, like I turned 13 the year the web was born. Like I've been there from the beginning, but wasn't really thinking about building businesses on the web until later, until I think I heard about 37 Signals, probably. Like that's when it happened. You kind of need an inspirational figure.
I think about that same exact thing a lot. I'm really curious for Caleb and Taylor about like who or what company or product was your early inspiration. I mean, like for me, I literally remember, this must have been like 2008, 2009. I'm a professional web designer, developer, working at an agency. Maybe I was starting to go freelance at that point. And I just stumbled into what 80 was building with Woo themes for WordPress.
Yeah.
Selling $59 template, theme templates for WordPress. And I just like discovered that. And I'm like, I have the same exact skills that 80 has. I'm a designer, developer. I could build themes for WordPress, but I'm just doing them for clients or for some company. This guy's selling thousands of copies of $59 digital. And I remember like spending like a whole night just reading every blog post this guy wrote, just like going down the rabbit hole. Like this is a whole entrepreneurial path with the builder creator skills that I happen to have. What am I doing? Just,
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, because you guys took the open source path, right? Because that's a path that I never really embraced in terms of like, I want to release, I want to spend hours upon hours building something and release it into the world for free, into the community, and maybe good things will happen. Like I could never square that math for myself. I'm curious, like early on, like how did you think about open source as like an inspiration or like a path to like invest your time into?
Yeah, I didn't really even think about it that way, honestly. I was only focused on building a framework that I could ship stuff faster on, and open sourcing it was just like putting it on SoundCloud, more or less. Like, I don't care if anyone else listens to it. I don't care if anyone else uses it, but like I might as well like put it out into the world. And honestly, in some ways, I feel like I didn't even really start a business until this year. Like, when, you know what I mean? Like, everything I built up, basically up to this point, was just stuff I personally needed or wanted to build. And I put it on the internet and charged for it. But it was still, like, at the end of the day, just building stuff that I was personally interested in, that I cared if other people used it to a point, especially later. But when I first released, like, Laravel Forge in 2014, which was my first commercial product, I honestly didn't care that much. I wasn't trying to start like a big business. I was just trying to automate my like server management for myself. And it happened to go well. But I remember telling my wife, like, it'd be cool if this like paid our phone bill. You know what I mean? Like, so I was definitely not trying to start a big business. I mean, things that were inspirational just philosophically for me getting into programming was like 37 Signals and They're Getting Real book for sure was one of the books I read as I was building Laravel. Was super inspirational.
How did you hear about it? How did you
know it was
that?
that old?
How did you
like
discover it?
That's a good question. I don't really remember. I read it in PDF format, just like off their website. I'm not honestly sure how I got into it.
Like you're in Little Rock, you're working for a trucking company or something. Like how did you even know that was out there?
Yeah, I don't know. It was a big company that I worked at. There were hundreds of other developers. I probably had seen like Basecamp or Campfire or something like that for like project management, and then started reading their stuff. I honestly wish I could remember how I first saw it, but it was just super inspirational to me in terms of like the way I shaped Laravel and how I built it, and focusing on the features that I did.
Yeah, because you were like trying to build an invoicing app or something originally.
Yeah, basically, yeah. All sorts of like random apps like that.
Yeah, you gotta make that a Laravel starter kit. I think just for the history of it. Finally get that thing out there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, actually, one of the first apps was an invoicing app called CoinFly, and actually this was live. This was a real app. I built it with a guy named Michael Hasselbring, who was one of the first other Laravel developers I know, who for some reason also happened to live in Arkansas, and he was like Laravel user number 4 or something like that.
Oh wow!
Just happened to also live in Arkansas, which is like crazy odds. But yeah, we built an app called CoinFly and launched it, and I think that's the only other app I've ever launched outside of like the Laravel world that had nothing to do really with Laravel infrastructure.
Now's
Where
your
is
time,
he now?
Man.
Wow.
Yeah, where's
What's he doing
CoinFly?
now? Where is he now?
Oh yeah,
I know, like,
where's that
I'm
dude
still
now?
I'm still friends with Michael on Facebook. Yeah, he's still a developer. He may have some screenshots of CoinFly on his machine somewhere. Have to dig them out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And Caleb, did you kind of follow the Otwell Wathen playbook? Was that your goal with Livewire, or were you just playing around with it and then you thought, oh, maybe this could be the way to go? Yeah.
I mean, I just started building open source stuff in Laravel ecosystem and Vue, but because I don't know, it's like the way. That's what you just do. It's like you do something cool at work, and then you go, oh, I can make this a package, and then you get excited about like, oh, I can name it. Like, what could the name be? What would the logo be? Like, oh, this is like a thing that I could build and put out into the world. And so I just kept doing that and never thought about money. Obviously, I quit my job and just kind of just thought I was going to be like poor for a while. But then Adam, it's all Adam and the $60,000 ebook, and that post. And I was actually like applying to Titan at the time or something, or I was he's the reason I got hired, because he left a vacancy and then me and Daniel like filled his spot. But anyway, I had followed Adam for like a while, as I followed like Taylor and Jeffrey and whatever, listening to Laravel podcasts. But yeah, Adam was the I guess like Taylor and Jeffrey and inspirational, but I never thought like I would build like anything like they've built. But then when Adam dropped that and like wrote an ebook and made that money and quit his job, I was like, all right, like I'll do that. Like that's a very, I remember like seeing that and going, I'm going to do this. Yeah. I don't know when, and it probably won't be on the same level, but I'm going to do it. Like there is a formula right here, and it's so like practical. I'm going to try it.
When you went out on your own, when you left full-time employment, were you already thinking in terms of like, I can make a living from products like that? Or were you thinking like, I'll just contract, or what was
I thought
drive?
I just wanted to have fun on GitHub for as long as I could before having to get a real job. And then I would just like consult, I told myself. So I remember having to like tell my family that, and they didn't really get it. And people were like pretty worried about me. And and I kept the stub for that year. It was mostly my wife's income and like 1 month of Titan, but it was like $25,000 in revenue for like 2019 or something.
It's funny. I remember
just money in our house.
I remember. So I went out on my own. I left my full-time job in 2008, right, like 10 months before the economic crisis back then. Which is, I think about that a lot. But so I made it through that, and I remember my dad saying to me like, and this was like 6 or 7, maybe 8 years into me being self-employed. He's like, so this like self-employment thing, it's kind of working for you, it turns out. I'm like, yeah, it was rough in like the first year or two, but like I figured it out. It's like it took a while for my parents to really like come around. Like, oh, he's
I got like aunts who are like really worried and with my parents, whatever. But it's like, and not anyway. There's still this part of me that wants to like go on a tour and be like, look at these pay stubs, like you were wrong. But
I'm curious about today. So again, like I'm so inspired by both of you because you both have this like creator energy in the blood. It definitely early on, you rode that energy into great success in this career. How does that translate to today when you have a much larger audience? You have thousands upon thousands of people using the products that you create. So how does that influence what you decide to build? How you decide on features or roadmap or what's worth investing in? Has it changed you? Like now that you actually have businesses on your hands, how are you thinking differently about the stuff you do?
You want to go first or me, Caleb?
I'm still in the. I'm where Taylor was. Like I don't have a business. I just have like I have like kind of a full-time employee and.
Caleb, this is the time to go into your thing. I'm an artist.
Yes.
Listen, I don't give a shit.
Justin, please.
Let me do my Caleb impression. It's like, listen, I don't care if I make money. I don't care about any of this. I'm doing things slow. I'm doing things my way. I'm an artist. I want to release good stuff that is high quality that only I can do. That's.
I mean, it's like even if there's times where I don't want to be that way because I want to be more strategic and whatever. But I always kind of just default to like I'm building a date picker right now and I'm spending like over a month on it. And just because I got obsessed with the problem and it's like I have to see it through and I'm probably not like shipping other things I should be right now, but I'm building the date picker and that's my whole life. So I don't know. That's kind of how the creator energy just comes out because I'm just get obsessed with a thing and then just do the thing. So yeah.
I think the thing about this is I've told this to Caleb too, but I remember meeting you at Laracon and then following you on Twitter and then seeing you record those initial Livewire videos.
Yeah.
And I just looked in Telegram. I DM'd Taylor and Adam and I'm like, what's up with this Caleb guy? Like he's just got this energy. And
he was very excited. He was so excited.
But there's something about that I think is part of this whole thing is if you can get fired up about something, if you care about the product, if you care about how people are going to use it, if you care about the logo and the design and all of these things, that all feeds into all of this. Like that's how this stuff gets built. And
exactly, there's a value to that creative energy. And this is something that I'm dealing with, like the aftermath of like all the other side of this. Like I've been in the rabbit hole building a block editor with Rails and Tailwind and stuff, which is insane. Like and like I'm in the weeds on it. And it's coming along and everything. But
building like a radio checkbox is insane.
So
building like a toggle switch is like the hardest thing you could do.
Exactly. and so I've been in this for the past month. I'm excited about it. I'm spending a crazy number of hours on it. I think it's going to be good. But but in the back of my mind or in the front of my mind, I'm constantly thinking of like, is this a business? Are all these hours worth it? Am I going to get an ROI from this? Am I marketing it? Am I going to market this? Like, there's that business brain and the creator brain. But I'm trying to get back in touch with that creative energy because I think that can actually drive something great in the world. Whereas, if I'm just thinking too opportunistically, it's kind of
how do you think about that, Taylor? Because now you got this, your venture capital, and previously it seemed like you were really high on the creator energy. Like I want this. I think this is good. Do you still got that going on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll just kind of tell it from my personal perspective. I think, when I was in the midst of Laravel bootstrapped era, something I always thought about a lot was how is it all going to end? Like what is going to be this big open source framework, and I've got all these businesses, and like I was just curious, like how's all this going to end? Is it slowly going to fade? Is it going to is some other new technology going to come along and like supplant us or whatever? And in a lot of ways, I consider like the first chapter of Laravel's history did end, like this past year, with like the culmination of like, we built Laravel to this point. I launched all these bootstrap products and they were successful, and we raised this big venture capital funding round. And that's the end of like the bootstrapped Laravel era. And I think it is a good thing, because I think that I was reaching a point to where, as an artist and as that sort of creative person, I was just sort of coasting a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think now it's like I needed a fresh challenge of like, can I deliver that at scale? Like, can I maintain like world-class products? Can I make sure that everyone's shipping really great stuff we can be proud of, that everyone's happy to build these great things together at like a 50-person company, a 100-person company, a 200-person company? And it sounds like I never would have imagined myself being in this place, but I think I just got to a point where like I had sort of done everything I wanted to do in a bootstrapped world. And it was like, okay, this is great. And it was just like, I needed a fresh challenge, and building, I can still scale the company in a lot of ways the way I want to scale it, because I'm still CEO of the company. I set the culture in a lot of ways. I set how we work in a lot of ways. I determine the product vision. And so like right now, my new challenge is, can we be Laravel at scale and just make it bigger and better and still maintain the same vibe and culture and all of that? And that's what I'm like super interested to see play out now as like chapter 2, of the Laravel story of can we take it there? And I think, like I see myself as like a servant of PHP at this point, like me and PHP are intertwined forever. And
Yeah.
if I will retire, a PHP developer at this point.
Yes.
And I want to build, like the best products that we can possibly build for PHP at scale for everyone and make them easier than ever to use. So that's like my new challenge, and where I'm like deriving fresh energy from, like just what I needed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm taking away from this whole conversation is like how personal what we build, and whether what we're creating or our businesses, how personal it is. I mean, maybe to flip it over to Justin, I'm curious to hear how you think about this, because I remember when you first announced that you're joining John to get into Transistor.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, that makes perfect sense for Justin Jackson. Like because before that, I knew you like first as a podcaster. Like you were always a podcaster for years before Transistor came along.
Yeah.
And it made perfect sense that
Yeah. I mean,
how do you think about that today?
yeah, I mean, this is the whole challenge, is like, I like telling people to start businesses and how to start businesses, but the actual mix of what works is very difficult to divine, especially for another person. How do you do this? Well, you got to get really interested in things. You got to build some things.
Yeah.
You got to get passionate about some things. And you got to also keep your eyes open for things that could possibly have an economic engine that can make it work. That's the whole thing about all of this, is that you can be excited, but the reason that some ideas work as businesses and some don't is that they have better economic engines underneath them.
That's the luck. That's luck. Like the only reason that I make any amount of money is like there's an alternate universe where even in Rails, like from talking to Rails people at Rails World or whatever, like and talking to people about numbers even, and business owners in Rails, the Caleb's in Rails, and how much are they making? What are they doing? And it's like the pie is so much smaller. Like how much money is out there for an independent developer to make a Livewire or a Flux and then sell that to other developers is just smaller. Like I just got lucky that the PHP Laravel world has more money, is bigger. I don't know, like things like that. It's just, but even programming in general, I could have been into playing the lute. I don't know, it's like, that's the luck part.
Yeah, some of this is luck, but I do think you can see the difference between me and you guys is that you guys are just more talented than me.
That's not true.
In a way it is, because there is a way, I think, of observing momentum in a market. And I felt it as Adam introduced me to Taylor. Taylor and I hung out a few times, and then I went to my first Laracon, and I was just like, what is going on here? This, like, why isn't everybody in tech talking about this?
You emceed your first Laracon, right?
Yeah, I think I spoke the first one, and then I emceed the second one. Yeah. And Caleb was in the crowd going, "Who the fuck is this guy? This motherfucker fucking." And I was like, "I don't know. I'm here." But yeah, I think I recognized right away, like, holy crap, there is something going on here that is really special, and there's a momentum here. So there's always going to be a series of fortunate events, but it's kind of like increasing your luck surface area. If you just keep buying a lottery ticket, which has the same likelihood of winning every time you buy it, then sure, your life's not going to be, you're going to have less potential for things to happen.
Yeah.
But if you seek out those communities where stuff happens, and I think the reason Taylor initially invited me is he read a blog post and he asked if I could speak about it at Laracon. So that was my ticket into that community. And so, yeah, you got to do things. You got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
There's a way of orchestrating this that will help. And I mean, I think the thing we all need to think about is, my worry is that's not happening anymore for kids who are 19 and 20, and the PHP world needs that. Like, if the median age of a PHP developer is 45, and the median age of a Rails developer, I'm guessing, is about the same age, it kind of sucks. And there's problems there. There is a pipeline problem.
Yeah, that's
there.
wild.
And I talk about this with Adam too. I think, like, even for Tailwind, it's like you need young people to be getting excited about building stuff on the web in order for you to have a pipeline. This is a problem in podcasting right now, because my kids think a podcast is something that happens on YouTube. And if you think about the average Apple Podcasts listener, like people who use Apple Podcasts for podcasts, they're probably in their 40s. That's a demographic gap problem. And you have to be thinking about it, especially when you have time and energy and resources to influence it in some way.
Interesting though, because it's like that demographic. I think this is probably true for both podcasting and developers in the Laravel ecosystem, and I guess maybe Rails, is that, like, if you're selling to the 35 to 45 age group, like, that's the group that actually has money to
That's
spend.
the valuable demographic.
You know,
it's like the best demographic.
They're listening to podcasts. They're going to buy like a luxury vehicle, or they're building stuff
Athletic
with
Greens.
Laravel. They're working for like businesses. Whereas the kids are, they're, you know.
Working with this college grad over the summer was very interesting to me. So this college grad, Ferdinand, needed a job. I said, well, I've got some extra money. Why don't I hire you to build a Laravel app? Something I just wanted to use for Transistor. And so, using my own money, I hired him over the summer. And there's a few things that were interesting. One was just like how much energy I got from working with somebody who was junior. And I think a lot of development teams are missing that now. Like, people don't hire juniors. And it was just so fun to take someone who didn't even really understand what Saas was, and show him, and had never even seen really Stripe, or had never used Laravel, had never used Livewire. And each time he's like, oh, wow. Oh, you can do this. And he's just figuring all this stuff out. And then the job market's still bad. He got a few offers here and there, but now him and his buddy are building a SaaS for like auto dealerships or something like that. And there's that whole experience of seeing this kid like kind of learn and being able to mentor him, and him building a SaaS app from start to finish in a summer using Laravel, which the speed of which he was able to do it was incredible. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to go build my own thing now. And who knows if it'll work. It might take him 5, 6, 7 tries. But
it is true. Like, I'm so out of touch with the 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like what they're going to do in the, like, because for me, like, I learned a ton from the guy sitting next to me physically in the office in the small agency that I worked for as my first job. Like that's how I learned CSS. It was like asking this guy 1,000 questions.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
It's going to be, you're going to learn, if you're excited about web or if you do something like that and you're 20, you're going to learn React and Shadcn because Claude is going to you're going to say, I need this. And Claude's going to go beep, 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 Shadcn, React. Here you go. Lucide icons. And that's an interesting thing to me now is like the pipeline's kind of dictated by what the people making these models like want to make the default tech to build this stuff for you with. It's like kind of feels kind of unprecedented in terms of like how it's going to really change things,
Yeah.
or set like one tool is incredibly dominant,
Yeah.
That is where I think the discussion around AI is like, it's not so much about, because so many of us like more experienced developers like, oh, it's not good enough to build what we could build. Of course that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that a lot of us are maybe a little bit blind to is that it makes it so much easier, or it will be the go-to pathway to learn how to build stuff.
And it is
if it
for
isn't
me
already.
now, like in a lot of, if you had to go build something in Rust, like I don't know if you're a Rust developer, but you're gonna use ChatGPT or Claude or something, right? Like, I think you'd be pretty foolish to not.
I think there's things that you guys can do, and probably me too. But the like, I think Laracon should have free tickets for younger people, for college kids. I think if you're doing another Livewire day, I think you got to reach out to every college, just have a mailing list, and build relationships with those people, and try to build some of that pipeline with younger people. Because I think they will get fired up about it, because the story's like friggin' awesome. Like, like people, kids are wondering, like, how do you have a career and how do you make money and how can you do something that's fulfilling? And the world is pretty dire right now. It feels like there's this positive message out there that you could be connecting, and we've got all these great examples of people who have done it, but there's not a lot of people like purposefully doing that stuff.
Yeah, I see it like, I think for the past year and moving into this year, I've been trying to move a lot of pieces on like this chessboard in my head of like how to correct that pipeline problem. Part of it is our Laravel cloud platform, just to make it easy to ship your stuff when you're done, which is a big, with like stuff like Vercel has become so easy to use in the JavaScript world that we just had to catch up to do there. Stuff like our new starter kits we're working on, our boot camp, Laracons. I think your ideas about Laracon are great, but I'm hopeful that this year we can get enough of these chess pieces in place where it feels like, okay, there's actually a compelling thing we can show a new developer. Hey, the fastest path to launching apps and making money on the internet is building Laravel apps. Everyone wants to make money, So the pipeline problem is just something I think about a lot here at the company and just internally with myself.
Yeah. And I think that's where starter kits are a good idea. Thinking outside the box, like thinking, if you go back to interview anybody and they're like, oh yeah, I started with HyperCard, or I started with Macromedia Director, or like there's all of these things that used to allow us to build stuff. I got started in Microsoft Access, where you could build stuff in that GUI editor and then figure stuff out on the back end. Like there's a lot of room, I think, for that kind of stuff that would help. And
more visual building, you mean?
Visual building, but also just examples. Examples that might resonate with, there's a Spotify API.
People.
Do kids even know what an API is, and that Spotify has one, and you could like build something with it?
Off the cuff thing, starter kits. So like, I think we're entering a web where it's like something like, how do I put this in, not incriminate myself or anybody else. So like UI component libraries are the new starting point for building interfaces, where like it's not divs anymore. It's not divs.
Right.
And it's not just CSS. It's literally a component library is the baseline. And then it's starter kits. So it's like most it's like, so like as far as Laravel getting in, it's like it has to nail what you're doing. It has to nail the starter kit story because that's it. And then the level below that is UI component library. And then the geekiest of geeks will pry open that and actually write like a tag, you know, but it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like definitely is the era. We are in the era of the starter kit and the component library. And we have to just like double down on that as hard as possible and make Laravel a place where like we have all the back stuff. We just got to have all the front stuff. So it's like,
we really are. You know,
The new Laravel.com is going to be so great. I wish I could show it to all y'all, but it launches next month and it really kind of takes this on head first. Like,
Well,
this
show us
whole-
right now. Give us a little exclusive.
Yeah, I'll send you some screenshots after this.
I can't wait to see that.
So Brian, like you're presenting this thing that you're saying like, you know, me and Taylor, like builders at heart, just scratching our own itch, and then the business is kind of like come off of that, but you're kind of approaching it like, well, yeah, I mean, I could build that, but is there a market for it? Like, you know, this more like business mentality, which, and you're like, is that good? Whatever. And I think it's smart. So I just want to share one thing that I'm thinking about and hear your opinions, because it's like a spooky opinion for me to have. It's like, I'm not used, and Justin probably knows it from my podcast, but I'm wondering if I'm becoming disenchanted with open source.
I listened to that. But
Yeah, and
Really good.
it's this like interesting thing that's happening to me where all I knew was open source, and that's the only way that you released software.
Yeah.
And then I went on this crusade with Flux. Is like, I want Flux to be free, but I don't want everybody to steal it and create their Flux wrappers, and then I'm just feeding all the beasts, you know. And I've basically, the enlightenment moment was somebody literally told me, I don't know, somebody, it's like, you actually have to charge money for it, not for the purpose of making money, but for the this is the only sanctioned way to protect your value here. And I was like, boom, this is crazy. Like literally I have to charge money for this if I want to sleep soundly at night and not be constantly like fighting off hordes of people forking or copying and pasting or doing their own, you know, iteration of it. So that was the first kind of fundamental shift. And now, so Flux's JavaScript core is completely detached. I maintain it. It had a separate name for a while. It's a completely detached library in my brain, but nobody knows that because I was going to make it this open source, you know, like library that anybody in Rails could use, totally headless, could build even the most complicated combo box, the date picker, like everything. But I never put it out there because all I see is like, I put it out there and now I have all the open source BS to deal with, but whatever. It's like people are just going to wrap on top of that value and I don't get to capture it, and then I maintain it for everybody. And it just seems like all roads lead to not smart to do. So why don't you like take all this energy and innovation and put it in something that people can't just steal from you, which is like totally new to me. But it's becoming sort of the way that I'm thinking is like, it was so weird to not open source something. It feels selfish. I'm like not sharing this with people, which is the weird thing. But anyway, so I'm sharing that because I'm like, what's this, you know? Yeah.
To me, charging for Flux is the most completely obvious move you can make.
Yeah.
Like, and I for all the reasons you said, but also because it's a great business. And you've built an incredible product and it's, you know, worth charging for. But the way that I think about it is, like, this is why I have a hard time wrapping my head around the open source path in terms of a strategic business path, because maybe it's not exactly the same, but to me, it's a freemium model, right? Open source, like highly generous product available for free, but to make this sustainable, whether it's sustaining as a small company or something large at scale, like you need to have some way to monetize it. And I always come from a small bootstrapper perspective. Like I've tried freemium plays on things, and it's just incredibly difficult to make that work sustainably unless you have a huge distribution advantage.
Right.
And you, both of you have this incredible distribution with your open source, achievements in this ecosystem, right? So you're at such a massive advantage there right out of the gate. Like it's about time you have a product like Flux, you know, to
I do,
make it,
right. And it's like, well, could I have done any of this if I didn't have all the open source like stuff, you know? But yeah, right. That's
Taylor, did anyone get salty with you when you released Forge as a paid product?
I don't remember people being very salty about Forge. I think I remember the most sort of like salty reactions about Laravel Spark, which was like a SaaS starter kit for doing recurring billing in Laravel apps. And people were kind of salty that wasn't open source for whatever reason.
I guess it's the difference between a downloadable and a hosted thing. Like if it's hosted, it's like typical
infrastructure.
subscription.
It's like
yeah, people want code to be free. I think like in general, they just have this sensibility to where if it's a code package, like it should be free.
Yeah, that's
if it's
the
like
distinction.
a hosted website, then I'm okay paying for it for whatever reason, you know.
But then like the reality is like there are so many people working in businesses that will happily pay a 300, 400, more license fee to download code to use in their business. You know.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, it feels like Taylor, you've been kind of like, I know that talking to Adam Wathan, he has this like, there's this like dark side of open source that maybe I don't see, which is just
that's the thing that you guys would know much more about. Like,
but it doesn't seem like you really experienced that, Taylor. Like it's been fine for you.
I think I've experienced it. I just think I'm a callous husk of a open source developer at this point. You know, I think in the first few years, say the first 5 years, it definitely bothered me, you know, like the complaining, the sort of like entitlement mentality that some people have around open source, where, you know, open source is not like just like servitude, you know, to the community. You're just kind of building things and trying to have fun and build cool stuff. I think these days I just like don't really think about it or worry about it, you know, but you know, I know it bothers a lot of people.
Yeah.
I get like, I feel like I'm past the point of caring about the entitlement and things like that. But I have a question for you, Taylor. When you like, Laravel seems so well insulated from the outside. Laravel's business, Laravel's open source seems so insulated. Like when I built Alpine, it was like 2 months. And then there was an alternative to Alpine that was basically Alpine. And then Evan, you made Petite View, which was basically Alpine, just to whatever. And so it's like, I just don't see almost ever, Laravel's this big community, you know? I almost never see anybody create an alternative to Laravel. Like, is it the tech moat? What is it? But it feels like you're not staving off new PHP frameworks every day.
Yeah, I think part of it's a tech moat. I think a lot of it is just a time moat. Like, the amount of time it would take to recreate sort of like the framework, but then not only the framework, it's like the docs, Cashier, Socialite, Horizon, it's like Nova, all of these packages, and then putting things around it, which I've been extremely lucky. And maybe the luckiest part of the whole Laravel journey is, you know, people like you, Caleb, and also people like Jeffrey Way who come along and they create something like a Laracast. And you know, it's just like, if you create a new PHP framework, you just don't have a Laracast on day one, you know, like sort of evangelizing your framework. So I think that's part of, you know, what creates such a large moat around Laravel, and probably Ruby on Rails to a similar extent, where there's just so much time has passed and so much stuff has been built, and educational material and videos and courses. It's like, it's so hard to like reach parity with that.
Okay, so picture this dystopian future. Taylor, I go, you know, Laravel, oh, it's so great, it's so powerful. But like, let's say like you're like Symfony or something. Oh, but it's so bloated. There's like 50 folders or whatever. I'm going to create Schmaravel. Schmaravel is this like beautiful, breezy, like there's like one file and like it's functional and it's just like file-based routing and you only use what you need. And under the hood, you see Illuminate everything, you know, like Symfony down in the deep. But the thing you're interacting with is called Schmaravel. And you go to our docs. And then when you want Eloquent, we go over to Laravel's docs for Eloquent, but you can use its whole ecosystem. But you use your, and then this starts, and then there's a community, and then people create these starter kits for it. And it's like, I'm a Schmaravel guy. Yeah. It's like,
is this your
what
plan,
about this?
Caleb?
That doesn't bother me.
Yeah, this sounds like a product being born here.
So
I want to, like, how does this make you feel? What do you think about this?
Well, from a business perspective, it would not bother me, because I think that our success as a company doesn't have to be dependent on Laravel. And I think this is the fundamental thing
That's
with maybe
awesome.
Tailwind or Livewire, where if there's a Smaravel, great, let's host every
Do they
Smaravel
sell
app on
Forge?
Laravel
Do they
Cloud.
sell- yeah,
let's
right.
host every Smaravel app on Laravel Forge,
Yeah.
and even like pivot those products, to focusing on those things if we need to. And those products are actually really hard to build. So, I've always, and I'm trying this even more so with cloud, to disconnect the success of Laravel with the success of Laravel, the open source framework, with the success of Laravel as a cloud hosting company. Those are kind of two different things, where we can go beyond Laravel into all of PHP or even into other languages, if we wanted to. So I think that's why it doesn't bother me anymore. It definitely really bothered me back when I didn't feel like I had I didn't have a Forge or something like that, and it's like someone could fork Laravel at any time if they got mad, and then just create a slightly slimmed down version, because developers love sort of light, fresh tools and
Lightweight alternative too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore. Although that being said, I still watch the PHP space like a hawk for any, new frameworks, new ideas,
That's what I'm looking
new
for.
competition.
That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, this
Got
would
the
be
fire.
This would be interesting. What's each of your anxiety level when it comes to competition as a percentage? Taylor, if you had to give it a percentage, what would you give it?
I'm mainly anxious, not so much these days about our competition in sort of the Laravel hosting space. I'm more anxious in just being able to deliver great products that don't disappoint everyone.
Okay.
That's what I'm actually most anxious about at this point, in my career, because I feel like, Laravel, we've built something pretty good at Laravel, but now we're trying to build something really great. And it would so bum me out. If we launched big products and it's just these kind of suck, the community just isn't feeling them. That's what I'm most
I was kind of
about.
curious about who you even think about as competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I think
is it like the non-PHP developer?
Yeah,
the
I guess.
pipeline problem, right?
Yeah, a little bit the pipeline problem. But there's ways for us to. I'm totally open to running non-Laravel apps, running just plain PHP apps, or even running Ruby on Rails apps on our platforms at some point if we want to expand our customer base. You know what I mean? If we feel like we've kind of okay, we've done what we can in the Laravel world, let's bring this experience to Rails, to Django, to Express, to whatever else.
Dude, you got to go
try to
full
build-
circle, do .NET.
Oh man, I really do have to. That'd be so good.
So what's your anxiety level with regards to launching Laravel Cloud? How anxious are you about thinking about that and going, I hope you just always seem so calm, but are you?
No, I'm anxious about it. I think anyone that's launching a big product is going to be anxious about it. And, but again, hoping it's just the experience people hope for, hoping it doesn't go down, hoping it doesn't crash.
Yeah.
We spent so much time on this product, and, I think we've really, dotted our I's and crossed our T's on this, and we've built a really great team around it. But you're always going to have those butterflies in your stomach anytime you launch a big product. So I'm just hopeful it really delivers what the community deserves and what they want.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Caleb? What's your anxiety level these days?
On a scale of 1 to unhealth?
Well, we went to 1 to 100.
Unhealth.
Yeah,
No, I sometimes am easy breezy,
Yeah.
and have a really good perspective, and realizations help me. At one point, I used to get anxiety about other people making educational content about Livewire because I was trying to sell screencasts, and then I realized that's so dumb, and it's an all boats thing, and releasing that is really helpful for my brain. But I will say that it can be unhealthy at times for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You watch The Last Dance? Did you watch that?
Yes.
Michael Jordan
Okay.
series, right? So I'm not comparing myself to MJ, but his
I always said
those
you're the Michael
times.
Jordan of.
Right. A lot of people say I'm not saying it. A lot of people say it.
I don't know. That's what I'm hearing.
I mean, I've heard it, but when he's talking, I go oh, I get what that's like, which is crazy. So watching that is kind of trippy for me. And he does that thing that they made fun of on SNL, where he's and then that guy stepped in my, and I took that personally. You know, he's like, and I took that personally. And when he says that, like over, and you're like, whoa, this dude's got like some demons.
Yeah.
But that's what drives him.
Yeah.
It's like, I have some of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, oh, I get that. And the more that I have made friends with people in the same boat of like building things and having these babies that people try to, you know,
Yeah.
Anyway, I chose the wrong metaphor. The more I interact with other people feel that way too. You
Yeah.
assume everyone else like, and I don't even know like the depths of Taylor's emotions about a lot of this stuff, but I would assume that he's easy breezy about a lot of the stuff. But because I've seen other people and myself, I now just assume that he's Michael Jordan too.
Yeah.
And he's going to take it personally too, because that's what you do when you create something that you love and you care about. So
Interesting. Yeah.
so yeah, unhealthy, but good for business.
I do think when you run a business, it is helpful if there's a part of you that's like, I will crush every enemy that stands in my way. You know what I mean?
You
Like
have to
that
have
real like
that, yeah.
Mamba mentality, Kobe, Michael Jordan mentality.
Yeah.
Can be helpful.
What's funny is Jason Fried always says he doesn't have that. He's like, we don't care about crushing the competition or whatever. But
Yeah.
I wonder what David says though.
yeah, maybe David's different.
How does David feel about that? I don't know.
What about
But
you,
yeah,
Brian?
I think.
What's-
I just think that a lot of people use this fire internally. I would guess that a lot of us do. I mean, I know I'm constantly like hard on myself about like it's not good enough. I can ship better stuff than this, or you know, I think it's good in the moment. Then I look at it tomorrow and like this is shit. And that's the thing that I'm constantly battling with in terms of competition, both in business and like the things that I create. You know.
So I'm making Flux into a Rails UI kit, and I'm working on a block editor, and I'm very excited about it. And I am going into Rails World, and I'm going to promote it. I'm going to get on stage, and I'm going to tell everybody about it. How does that make you feel, Brian?
We're gonna edit Caleb out of this podcast.
How does that make you feel? Like,
Oh yeah, get the intensity meter
No,
going
I
here.
mean, look, like it's definitely true that competitors see what really starts to actually bother me is when my competitors are either direct like friends of mine or people like well connected in my circles, and I hate it when because what ends up happening is I have to distance myself from them. I literally like unfollow people that I'm friends with because they're in the same product ecosystem that I'm in. I'm just like, I cannot look at what they're doing. It's going to drive me nuts.
and it's not. I've been in this situation, and I've like needed to do that, but they will see. In some ways, they'll see you disconnect, like you might unfollow or something, and it's like, oh, I'm trapped between. I don't want you to perceive this as aggression.
Yeah.
But like literally, I need to do this for my own mental health. Like I just
exactly
can't
it.
look at this
Yeah.
shit. You know.
Wow, this is good. I like how we ended this one.
Yeah.
We could keep chatting for all time, but the nice thing about the panel is we can have you guys come back anytime, and we'll continue on. And if folks out there have other questions, that's the whole thing. Like if you had stuff that you were wanting us to talk about and we didn't, get a hold of us. All the links will be in the show notes.
Yeah,
and
we'll definitely circle back with you guys on a future episode.
Yeah, we'll see how
this was fun.
intensity meter. I want to see Laravel Cloud. I need to get in there, Taylor.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'll shoot you an early access link.
Great. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having me. It's a lot of
thanks,
fun.
guys.